All right, I believe we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to, I think we're on DevStream number 15. This is the Knights of Honor 2 Sovereign DevStream, and we're excited to have you here. As per usual, I will wait to get a confirmation in chat that everyone can hear me and we have no technical issues. I'll see Yavor is already on top of it. I didn't even ask to get confirmation, and he already is saying it. So I think he's figured out the system. I've become predictable. Everyone, today I have one of my favorite guests, Veso. Veso's joining us today. Veso, say hi to everybody.
Hello, people. Nice to be here. Thank you, Brad, for hosting, and Alex for hosting the stream. It's a big pleasure.
Yeah, it should be. This is actually a very unique stream today. We've never done one quite like this before, so it's going to be a different kind of conversation, a different kind of set of topics, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But before we get into all the stream stuff, how have you been, Veso? How's life treating you?
So far, so good.
Yeah.
Maybe getting better with the spring coming very slowly. I would say almost no spring, but yeah, wait for it.
You say that, but I recall a trip a couple of years ago. I think it was like maybe 2 years ago, year and a half ago, when I came out and visited you in the springtime, and I think it was in April. And I was told all spring and Sofia is beautiful, and all this stuff. And so I had packed mostly mid-weather gear, and then right before I jumped on the plane, you guys had a blizzard, and I showed up, and it was like 20 degrees outside and snowing, and I had to go buy a scarf and gloves and everything when I arrived because it was so cold. So I don't know if I trust the niceness of your spring. April can still get really cold out there in Sofia.
Occasionally, that's not normal, but I miss those times, Brad. This quarantine, the virus, everything, and I miss our meetings where we met. Was kind of fun.
I know it's definitely just it's weird, and I think at first for me on a personal note, I actually kind of enjoyed the gap in travel for a little bit. My job, I travel quite frequently, and most of it's over to Europe, so it's a lot of back and forth. But so at first I'm like, man, it's nice to not be living out of a suitcase for a change. But I miss it, man. We haven't had any good Bulgarian food together in quite a while, so I look forward to being able to come back over and having an experience with guys. I can tell you the first time I met Veso, this is a fun story. The very first time I met him, he took me to this restaurant. I had just gotten off the plane. We went and checked into the hotel, and we went to this restaurant in Bulgaria. I don't know the name of it. You probably still remember. But man, he decided to give me like a tour de force of Bulgarian cuisine, and my goodness, we ate so much food. It was like enough. It was me, you, and Michael, and I think it was enough food for probably like 5 or 6 people. And it was like, let's try every Bulgarian dish we could think of. And so I was so excited to share his culture's food. It was quite a fun experience. So I know we're not talking about game stuff right yet, but still, it's a good story. It's a fun story of games are also about people, not just a game. So it was fun.
Yeah. Let's hope this happens again at some point soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like a couple people in chat. I see one proud Bavarian. I'm guessing he's a Bavarian. Visited Bulgaria. Bulgaria is really pretty, actually. The mountain in Sofia is gorgeous. I still want to go and try to climb back up to it one time. We always look at it and talk about it, but it's never happened. So we got to make that happen. Well, let's go ahead and get into our conversation topics for the day. So if everyone has not had a chance to read it, we are talking about DevDiary number 15, which is up on our community site. If you have not joined our community, we'd love to have you join. It's community.knightsofhonor.com. I'm sure my trusty friend in the background will post a link here in a minute. But it's where we post all of our dev diaries. We have lots of conversation there. We have a very excited community about the game, and it would be great to have you be a part of it. We also have Discord, we have Facebook, we have all the typical social channels, so there's a lot of ways for you to connect. But the dev diaries are always on our community site, so feel free to go over there and jump in. And Dev Diary 15, which we're talking about today, is a unique one. It's about the evolution of gameplay. So we've been doing now 15 of these dev streams and dev diaries. We've talked about a lot of different topics, from music to combat and army makeup to espionage. We've gone through all a bunch of different stuff. And as we've mentioned a number of times throughout these different dev diaries, and a lot of people have actually picked up on this and made comments about it. The game changes as we're building it. We iterate on things. We find some things that work well. We find some things that we don't work as well as we wanted them to, and we change them. And this dev diary is all about kind of exposing some aspects of that process with you, places where we've made adjustments to certain features that we've talked about in the past. And I think Veso and Alex, who you guys all know from previous streams, we're trying to figure out what will be an exciting topic for this dev diary. And I think this is a really cool one. So today it's all about the way things change in game development, which I know Veso talks about quite a bit. They'll make something and they're like, oh yeah, but we're still working on it. So be careful how much we share with the community. Now you get to see why, to a certain degree, how much things change. So it should be a fun conversation today.
That's right. Yeah, things are changing, and I think for good. It's hard to explain sometimes certain things, but I'm very thankful that we have the community that actually listens, and we follow all the feedback from whatever we write or post. We are reading very carefully, not answering every time, but we are reading all your feedback very, very carefully, and we take it also very seriously. So thank you for doing that and participating.
Yeah. And speaking of feedback, there was a lot of conversation on this dev diary. I think we had as of last night when I was working on the notes for the stream, there was 15, 16 comments already on the thread, and a lot of different people chiming in. So it's great to see the people being attached. I'll mention one thing right off the gate, and I'll talk about this also later. I know everyone is still eager for new gameplay footage, and I was talking to Veso while we were kind of prepping before the stream. We don't have anything new to share today when it comes to footage, but I do have his permission to say that in the next 1 to 2 months, so whether it's the next dev stream or the one after that, I'm going to push for the next dev stream. We'll see. But we're definitely going to be showing maybe 5 or so more minutes of new gameplay footage here really soon. So we've been working on a lot of UI stuff lately. The game has been covered in mostly programmer art for a very long time. We're starting to take what I would consider the first pass of kind of adding more actual art and functionality to the UI, and that will allow us to show quite a few new things. So hopefully next dev stream, maybe the one after that, but I can guarantee you by the next 2 months that you're going to see some new gameplay footage. And I know that should excite quite a few people in the chat who've been honestly asking after that for a while. And I think my producer in the background is putting up some of our previous footage now, but you're going to see some new stuff soon. So be excited about that.
Yep.
I'm watching Veso be like, but yes, we'll do it.
Well, there is, Brad, there is these things from the kitchen. I will share this little secret which we have. We still did not record the new voice lines for the new game, and right. Because it's very, very dumb to develop a game which is where you are supposed to be really inspired while doing it, and we actually are still using the voice lines from the old game as placeholders. I hope the community knows what the word placeholder means here. That yes. So we're still using the old voices, and we still did not record the new ones. And by the way, we like the direction, we like all the feel from how we did it 15 years ago. So I think we are going to keep that, but still, it's a little awkward to capture gameplay footage with the new game while using a mixture of old game voices plus developer speech. Because what actually happens and the way it works is if we have voice lines which did not exist back then, we are recording them ourselves in our office, and yeah, they are recorded by game designers, and they're not exactly a professional voice actors, so they might not sound as cool as they should. So it's kind of those little things are somehow making us a little uneasy to share exactly what the state is. Although the game is pretty fun to play, even today, it's quite okay. Yeah.
I think it's. I actually personally really like the game designer VO, VO voiceovers. I think when I hear Alex or another game designer's voice show up in the game. I'm like, oh, hey, cool. You know, that's my a friendly game designer telling me that I need to go do a thing. I like it, but that's a great example of you know, we're definitely going to be recording new voiceovers for Knights of Honor 2 Sovereign, and you know, you usually do that pretty late in development because you need to wait for enough of the script to be done that makes sense to go and pay for the studio time and the recording session time and the actors time. You know, on the flip side of it, and this is part of, I guess, being a part of this community, you are going to see things that we usually wouldn't be showing out to like press or to other people, because that's why you're here. You're here to get kind of an inside look. So, you know, you'll be able to get some of that look next time, and there may be some old VO. Maybe, you know, we were actually talking about this before the stream. We were saying that we were going to, you know, maybe cut the VO out, but maybe as a lark, we could actually have some of the designer VO show up specifically in one of those clips just so you can hear what the developers get to hear sometimes. I know I'm digressing, but there was a funny story of another project I worked on where the lead level designer wanted to get all of the script VO into a game. It was a shooter. It wasn't a strategy game. And so he went in on a weekend and recorded all of the VO for the entire game just on his own, just one take, recorded all the lines. And man, the QA testers hated him for that, because they basically all day, every day had to listen to Brett's voice saying every role of every actor in the entire, and so they're playing through the campaign of this game over and over again, and they basically just get to listen to Brett talking at them all the time for hours and hours and hours a day. And like, they're like, Brett would come up to say something to him, they're like, no, we've heard your voice so much, we don't want you to even open your mouth at us, we're so sick of hearing you talk. So yeah, maybe we'll throw one of the designer voice VO tracks in the gameplay cut that we'll make for the next DevDiary or DevStream. That'd be fun. Anyways, I digress again. That's not I can talk like this all. We've done it. We talk all day sometimes. So we should move on to the topics at hand. So going into the topics of that we're actually on the stream, we have a number of diaries that we're going to revisit and talk about. And the first one is some army changes. We talked about the army stuff back in, I think, DevDiary 5. We were walking through kind of how army control works and how you actually go and use your armies. And why don't you give us a little bit of insight into kind of what was how the army setup was back then in DevDiary 5, what we talked about, and then what is kind of the big change we've made.
Yeah, the main thing it was basically it was based on how the old game worked. In the army, you had certain amounts of let's say slots where you could hire squads of units, and that was your army. And in the old game, it was pretty fixed. There were like 9 slots for armies, for troops. In the new game, like 2 months ago, we had, or a month and a half ago, there were a variable number of space for hiring troops, but still it was the same in terms of one squad is exactly some certain amount of troops. Basically, if you hire, let's say, archers, could be 60 archers, and that's it. And we had a variable amount, like characters who were not marshals. I think they had like 6 slots available. Then marshals had 9. Then the king had 3 more, and in certain circumstances, your army could scale up to 21 slots. But still, there was this direct connection between a slot and main count. And we didn't like that at all, because it was very limited. The game campaign is very long. So as you start playing, what happens is that after a few hours, you kind of hit a cap, which is you have maximum armies possible, all your slots are full. Let's say full experience. Of course, it's not that easy, because sometimes you suffer defeats, things happen, so it's not so easy, but potentially there is a very hard cap, and the game becomes very flat from this point. And at some point we said, okay, it's much more interesting to play much more with the size of the army and retell this epic user story, or epic I would say cliche from history books, where somebody comes with epic army with lots of thousands of people. It wasn't possible in the old game, and it wasn't possible in Knights of Honor 2 like a month and a half ago. Now it's much more possible for this to happen, because we just changed our not our, but we changed the meaning of a slot or a unit icon. It's not just a fixed amount of troops and this is it. It's just more about how your army is, what your army composition is. So now,
about earlier, it was something you were talking about earlier before the call. We were discussing this topic a little bit just as we were hanging out, and I think that's a really good way to think about it. And I think it was something that was, I don't want to say misunderstood, because it's a complex thing to talk through, but it was a very a lot of people were commenting that they were worried that, you know, reducing the number of slots may simplify things or take some of the fun out of building your army. But I think everyone kind of viewed it as you know, number of units you were bringing in, because they still were in the mindset that each slot is a unit. And the slots are now very different. It's more, like you said, the composition, the makeup of your army. You know, what percentage of your army is archers versus light cavalry, which is, you know, defender or spearman type units. And then you actually can increase through a couple of different mechanics how many of those unit types that are there. So it's more like, what is the makeup, the composition of your army, and then separately how big those different individual units are. So you can have a army that's still quite big, that's all cavalry, and that may just be 1 or 2 slots of cavalry, but it's a very big cavalry army because you've spent time and resources into making it a powerful, you know, costly to maintain cavalry army. So it's a different way of thinking about it, and it definitely makes it a little bit easier to visualize, because you're not having to have 40 cavalry icons. You can have 2 or 3, but those are heavier, like they're thicker, they're taller. And I think it definitely adds a lot more. I played the last build when we added this in. I love it. Like, personally, I think it's one of the most exciting changes, because there's so much more growth and excitement to like getting those larger armies marching across the field, you know, specializing them a little bit more, leveraging your skills to like really have a heavy stack of, you know, cavalry or whatever. It's fun. It works really well.
Yeah, also it comes with its cost. You can scale up many times, not just twice or 3 times. You can scale your army or main count many times, but it has a cost and a price attached and disadvantages. So yes, you can organize the epic march and this epic scenario where you march with a really huge army, but then you have to prepare. The more manpower or man count you have in your army, the more food you'll need, the faster the food supplies for your army are going to be depleted. So you have to prepare. And with the armies, we have some additional mechanics where you can purchase or prepare additional stuff, like additional food wagons and additional man count, if you like, as well. But it has a high cost. So yeah, you can make epic marches, but you need to back it up with some economy.
Yeah, definitely. There was a question that was asked earlier by I think it was Massive 90, and I want to catch some of these questions as we go, because I think it can be really more fun to do it that way. It was talking about the siege units and if those had tie into the slots. And I mean, the siege units we're probably not going to talk about them yet, because there's a whole system around how that works. But the siege units don't really take up the same slot that the more melee or the military units do. They're a separate system, and they won't compete for those slots. They'll be competing for slots that have other purposes, but they're not going to compete with you bringing an archer or a heavy archer or a cavalry unit and adding those to your army.
Yeah. You know, there is this war train thingy, like how much additional things you can bring with wagons and stuff. And yeah, you have a choice. Will it be a lot of siege equipment, or maybe you need some extra food or some more main count and all that stuff. So, but it does not take from units variety. And actually, if your army, if it has 8 slots for troops there, it's 1 slot represents 1/8 of your army as composition. This is it. It's not reducing the number of slots. It's reducing the types of units you can have in an army from 9 to 8, which is, I don't think it's a big difference, but you still can scale it from 500 to 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 and more. So yeah.
And that's what I love about it. I mean, I want to tell you guys, and obviously, you know, you I've heard before, it's like, Brad, don't tell us how much fun it is to play the game because we can't play it. So don't tease us so much. But it's like, I had a lot of fun playing that last build. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was messing around with it. And like really playing it for an extended period of time, like 10 hours. And it's so much fun to see that growth of your forces in the beginning when you have you and the other kingdoms have smaller armies running around, and you're ramping up your economy, and you're growing your armies, and you're seeing them get bigger, and now you're making decisions of like, how do I want this army to be composed, like what units do I want to bring, and then do I want a whole bunch of footmen and a few archers, or I want a lot of archers, or like just making those decisions. It really, honestly, it mattered. In my experience, I know everyone in the forums or in the DevDiary were concerned that it simplified things. I actually think it made things a lot more, not a lot more in a sense that over complexity, but it added a lot more options. It expanded the way that you can grow and specialize your armies, and I really like that. I think it made things deeper in a way that I think adds a lot to the game without overcomplicating it. So that's really cool. Well, let's move on to our next topic, Veso, which is rebels and rebellions. So for those who have been with us for the entire journey, we talked about rebels back in DevDiary 7. So half of a DevDiary ago, I guess we're on 15. So if you cut our DevDiaries in half, it was half an age ago. And there were a lot of things we talked about with rebels and rebellions, and some of it's still the same, hasn't really changed much, but there are a couple things that we've been iterating on. I actually think that rebellions are something we're going to iterate on until the end of the project. There's such a dynamic system and tie into so many different aspects. So this is probably, you know, you can watch this DevDiary or this DevStream, hear about what we're changing now. I'm almost certain we're going to have other tweaks and changes as we go on. But maybe you can give everyone kind of a quick summary of how things were before and what we changed here.
Yeah, well, basically, even before we had this concept, which was not about a rebel, but a rebellion, which could be a little different.
Right.
So in the old game, let's compare to the old Knights format, there was no something like a rebellion going on. It could be a little abstract here to explain, but you know the stories, and again the epic stories about the big rebellion that happened at North or something like that. So rebellion is think about it as an object, and there could be many armies which are associated with this rebellion. We didn't have any of this in the old game. It was just number of rebels, individuals which were working without any common idea, without any common agenda, so to say.
They're just random AI armies wandering around and causing problems.
Yeah, just AI army wandering around and causing troubles, which had its fun, but there was no any structure into that stuff. And we have to also have in mind that this game is, in terms of number of provinces and all that stuff, is much bigger than the previous one. It's actually twice bigger right now. And dealing with, let's say, 50 individual AI-controlled rebels is not much fun. So we wanted to have first to capture that story about the big rebellion emerging somewhere, and also to put some structure into it and some more gameplay into it. So now we have rebellions, and they have leaders, and those leaders have their supporters supporting other armies which are moving around. Rebellions are associated with certain territories. So if a rebellion, let's say, happens in newly conquered territories, imagine this, they will prefer to stick there. They are not going to actually cross half of the map and go to your, half of the world. But as they start conquering and taking under control certain provinces, this area is starting to grow, so they can expand. And one of the changes which we recently did was actually many changes which were aimed to support that feeling and that user story. So you are not dealing with just dozens of individual AI-controlled armies which are just labeled rebels, but actually dealing with some organized rebellion which has leaders and so on and so on.
Yeah, so I think that was. Go ahead. Sorry, keep going.
No, please.
No,
anyway.
I think it was actually, for me, it was something that I found I mean, I think that it was the fact that it always happened that was frustrating, because you spent a lot of effort, um, uh, you know, cultivating a certain dynamic inside of your kingdom. Like you would spend effort building certain buildings, or you'd do royal court actions in order to keep rebellion risk down. And yet sometimes, before we made some of these changes, you'd have rebels all over the place. It's like, man, I've spent all this effort trying to have, like, to keep my people happy. My people are happy, but then there's rebels popping up in different kingdoms near me, because they're not maintaining it the same way. They're all going to war. So it's almost like I'm doing nothing. It really felt like, as I was trying to control rebellions in my own territory, that had no effect, because all the rebellions going on everywhere else were always going to be coming into my territory anyways, because they would just have, I mean, they were still a group of armies, and rebellions could grow out of control, right? You could have, like you said, it weren't just one army. They could grow into be multiple armies and multiple leaders, and those leaders could get stronger, and they could start taking territories. And all of a sudden you have, it's almost like this like it's like a kingdom on top of a kingdom that was all over you, also causing trouble. No matter what you did, you couldn't have any control over that, and it wasn't fun. It was actually more frustrating than fun, because it was like, well, if that's the case, then I might as well just let rebellions always happen. Like, why try to stop them? There's no reason to stop it.
Yeah, now there are many new ways to prevent rebellions, or at least take care for them. What was especially problematic was those, especially in the old game, those individual AI-controlled rebel armies. They were moving sometimes across your borders, just going pretty much wherever they please, which wasn't really logical, because if you think about it, in medieval times, a rebellion, it's kind of has its place of origin, its parks at certain location, and then it can spread like a wildfire, but still it should be attached to its own agenda. So it is now still possible for a rebellion in a neighboring country to affect you very badly. I mean, very badly. So you have these choices what to do. Maybe you can offer them some help with rebels. Maybe they can demand it. That also happens. They can come to you and say, please, we need some help with our rebels, so can you help me? And this is actually a cool choice to make here. But we try to make rebels a bit more stick to their original place and their original agenda. However, it's a cool story for a rebel becoming really famous, becoming really big, and getting out of control, so to say. So, but not thousands of them, just some epic few examples. Yeah, sorry about.
And I think that's the main point here, is that this is more about focusing what the purpose of rebellion was for the play experience, which is that if you don't take care of your kingdom, like, rebellions can happen and you have to deal with it. And if you do take care of your kingdom and you decide to invest in that, the rebellion chance is a lot lower. Before we made this change, it felt like that care didn't have an impact. Now it feels more like, I mean, sure, random things can happen sometimes. There may be a rebellion next to you that spills over across your border on that side, and you may have a couple of areas that are pillaged or some kind of pressure, but that's not the norm. And before, that was the norm. Before, there were rebellions going all over the place, and you never knew when one was going to wander in, so it felt kind of pointless to try to stop them. Now it's like, when it happens, it's more impactful. It's like a moment. You're like, oh, wow, these guys' rebellions have gotten so bad that now it's kind of affecting me, and now I can use that as a moment for diplomacy or for a war, and be like, hey, get your rebels under control, or I'm going to go and take over that province and deal with it myself. And I'm also going to take that land. Like, it actually adds more depth and more stories into the experience. And I like it. It feels more aimed and purposeful now, versus before it was very kind of chaotic. It was like there's always people wandering around, and you'd have a neighbor, like all of your neighbors could have rebellions, and they're all pillaging your stuff and theirs. And you're like, well, it's definitely, I like it a lot. I think it's a really solid change.
Yeah, you said it. It's not simplified. It's not dumbed down. It's less chaotic. So it's a bit more. There's a bit more gameplay in predicting what could happen and taking some steps to prevent big dramas and stuff like that. Yeah, it's less chaotic.
And Field Marshal, you're 100% right. So, like, that's rebellions. And I would encourage you to go take a look at DevDiary 7. We talked about rebellions, so we talk about that there. You also can watch the dev stream if you don't want to read the diary. But yeah, rebellions actually grow. So they start with like one leader and one army, and they have like a goal like overthrow a province because of some other reason, or maybe they're paid for by somebody else, and so they've started because another power is trying to enter. I mean, there's lots of different motivations that a rebellion can have, but once they start, if you don't get them under control, they actually can go from like a local uprising all the way like to a mass scale rebellion. And mass scale rebellions can have multiple armies with multiple leaders, and they can get stronger and stronger and cause a lot of different havoc. So yes, if you like say you pick off one army of a rebellion, but you haven't actually killed the rebellion's leader, and things continue to go, that army could be rebuilt, and you could have new foes that you have to deal with. It's a very dynamic feature. Another aspect of rebellions that is we talked about before that's also worth mentioning, rebellions can sometimes result in a new kingdom spawning out. So it is possible, there is a chance that a rebellion can take over a province and then found a new kingdom. So you may have a new neighbor as opposed to an old neighbor, like almost like the Civil War kind of concept, where a kingdom splits in half and a rebellion is so severe and the people are so mad that they never want to be part of that kingdom ever again. It's cool aspects of gameplay, and it adds a lot of fun dynamics and kind of those immersive gameplay moments where you don't always know what's going to happen. And honestly, the changes that Veso is talking about here with the rebellion have only improved that, as opposed to before. It was sometimes hard for those stories to come out of all of the chaos that was taking place. So it's really cool. Hope that answered your question. I think there was another Massam90 asked another question, which I think is a good one to answer as we go. So he asked, will there always be a rebel army right after you conquer a new province? I always thought that this feature was kind of annoying the old Knights of Honor.
No, not always.
Yeah, correct. Right.
Not at all. It very much depends on your kingdom authority. Remember the kingdom power? Well, it's now called crown authority.
Yeah.
It's a bit more complicated than the old game's kingdom power, but yeah, it depends how strong your power is and what you are doing and who are you conquering. It matters a lot. So sometimes the people in the newly conquered province, they will just welcome you, so to say. They'll be happy to help you, and even they could fight to support you in sieges and stuff. But sometimes it's very difficult, and you can expect some rebellions very, very soon after you conquer a province. But yeah, it's not always the case. That's the short answer.
Yeah, and actually, I think this is another indicative of, by the way, Knights of Honor, which I think is actually Ivory Knight. This is a very interesting balancing act between complexity and difficulty and simplicity. Like all these things kind of working together. What Veso just talked about is another, I think, example of just how much Knights of Honor 2 uses the core experiences, but really does expand that gameplay aspect. So I mean, now you could have a culture thing where that neighboring province actually prefers your culture, and when you come in and take it over, they welcome you with open arms, and there's no rebellion. They're actually very happy that you're there, and it's a very easy province to bring into your fold. The opposite also can be true. You can go into a province that really has nothing to do with you, and maybe they're they're frustrated because you have a reputation of going in and crushing people when you go in and like forcibly take them over. So the moment you go in and take over that province, rebellions spawn right away because they want to push you out immediately. And so those decisions can be things that you've made throughout your game that kind of set those, like the world kind of has some history to it. It remembers decisions that you made, and those can have impacts on other things. So that dynamic nature really does make it feel a lot more immersive. And it's what I love about it is a lot of it makes sense. Like it's complexity, but it's complexity that's logical. So it's like you don't have to really learn a new system. It's just as you're doing things, you'll see the world kind of react to you and respond, and it's quite cool. I think you guys will really like it. So I know that was a very long-winded answer to your question, Massive90, but hopefully you got quite a bit out of that. And this is actually a great segue. I didn't expect to set this up, but this transitions to our next topic quite beautifully, I think, honestly. So the next topic we're talking about is about in the DevDiary called Invasions that we did actually pretty early. I think this is DevDiary 4. And in this DevDiary, we're talking about what happens when you invade another kingdom and how those different steps take place, like how you take control of a province and Why don't you talk a little bit about what we discussed back then and how things were? It's been a while since we've changed this. This is almost a little foggy for me, but you can talk about kind of where things were at when we did DevDiary 4, and then we can talk about where things are at today.
Yeah. It's important not to mistake when we hear invasions with invasion plans, which was the topic of another diary. So it should have been named Conquest, probably, I guess. But never mind that. So how it worked before, you march with your armies, you have a siege probably, some battles and stuff, and at some point you occupy a province. It's not automatically joined to your kingdom. It's just in that state. It's occupied by you, but it's not yours. And then that's the most simple case. There are peace negotiations with other kingdom, and then eventually you can negotiate so you can keep this occupied province for you. Also, there was option for you to annex it with force, but after this feature, we implemented those war mechanics with alliances and all that stuff. And we found that maintaining this occupation state actually didn't help the game. It made it more hard to understand for an average player, I believe. And we decided to just slightly inverse the things. Who owns the province after a conquest? Now, the conqueror immediately owns formally the province, but this does not mean he has control over it. Normally, the newly conquered provinces, they are in very disorganized and in a state of a disorder. So there are many things you cannot do there. You have to impose your power before you can fully take the benefits of your conquest. But this can happen while the war still goes. But there is a complex, I would say, war history. So the game remembers what happened during that war, which has diplomatic implications. The other kingdoms, and the AI, they can really demand you return the lands you took and all that stuff. Also, the population remembers their original culture and their original kingdom, and the local nobility also maintains their loyalty more or less towards their previous sovereign. So it's not so easy. Actually, formally it's yours, but so what? You still cannot do a lot of things there.
Yeah,
and we found this thing much simpler.
It was a big challenge we had back then when we were working on this, because it was a cool idea, and I actually think that the concept had a lot of benefits to it, because when in the occupied state, it was occupied by you but still owned by the original kingdom, and there was this idea of like the original kingdom took it back. They were kind of like the liberating force, and there were kind of some cool benefits around that. But it got really complicated because you had to be able to communicate each of these states differently, like occupied versus disordered, and occupied, who owned it? Was it owned by this person or that person? And when it became into the disordered state, like there's a lot of different layers to it. And I remember actually there probably are still some pictures from that old dev diary where you had all these different like in-world UI elements, like different dashed lines and colored lines and all this stuff to communicate who owned what and what state it was in. Was it an ally? Was it an enemy that owned? It got really tricky. And it even though there were some elements of fun to it, I think the complexity and the extra layer didn't add enough to justify having that extra state. So we've simplified it down to kind of really just two states. It's either owned or it's in disordered. And disordered is still not like it's yours. Whoever, we have one clear owner. Province only has one owner at a time. But if it's in a disordered state, you really can't do much with it. You can't build on it. You don't get advantage from it. You don't get like some currency or food from it. It's like it's really just almost not in rebellion. It's just not really functional yet. And then you have to decide how you resolve that disorder. Do you forcibly do it? Do you use a cleric action? Do you use a diplomatic action? There's different ways you can do it. Do you wait till the war is over and resolve it this way? It allows us to, I think, add more depth and more complexity and interest around the disordered state and how you resolve it and what those different resolutions provide versus trying to add a whole bunch of layers to everything. And trust me, Discator, the game's not dumbed down in any way, shape, or form. I promise you that. The game has lots of complexity. This is a grand strategy game. I mean, there's a difference between making a game that you have to spend, a month and a half trying to learn how to play, and making a game that you can intuitively understand and then discover the depth as you go on. And I think that's our balancing act. We want to be able to let players jump in and have fun right away and not have to become a master in order to play the game successfully, but then discover all these different functionalities and features. I think you'll find that if you thought Knights of Honor was a cool experience when it came to that, you'll find that Knights of Honor 2 Sovereign has even more features and functionality than that one did by quite a bit, while still maintaining that line. So I think you'll be quite pleasantly pleased with that. And I think that's the point of even the system here. It actually, by removing the occupied state, it allows us to add more functionality in the disordered state. Versus if we have both, we have to kind of balance out how much complexity we add to both. You know what I mean? You can't add complexity in every layer infinitely, or the game becomes impossible. So it allows us to focus where the functionality comes from. Yeah, and I think it's still a lot of fun there. So.
Maybe the last thing here, it's not the most important, but still it matters a bit. It's the historical aspect of this. This kind of going in a war, occupying foreign territories, and then demanding some kind of a diplomatic confirmation of your conquest. It's potentially something which normally happened in the Renaissance and later after the Renaissance. So it was not very medieval thing. It was the opposite was more often like you conquer certain territories, and then during peace negotiations, you said, okay, I will agree to peace, but you have to return to me this and this and these castles which you took from me. That was more the case back then. And the entire occupation thing sound cool on paper, leads to certain things which Brad mentioned, but also it's a bit more later in history, I think.
Yeah. Well, also I think it's something that it's almost like a litmus test. If you guys know what those are, it's like a sanity check. Whenever you're trying to make a system and the UI starts getting so hard that you don't know elegant ways to solve the problems, that's when you maybe like have to take a step back and go, wait a second, did we over-design this thing? It is very easy, and I mean, I know a lot of you probably are interested in game design and development, how it works. Veso and I, having been around a little while, Veso more than I have, but it's very easy, especially for people that are new in the industry, to overcomplicate something and over-design something. And honestly, I feel like the UI is kind of exposes when you made that mistake. You're like, wow, we have how many different states to this thing? Like, how many different things do we have to communicate with the UI in order for the player to get this? Maybe we should take a step back and do this differently. Like, not oversimplify it, but just approach it differently, because we've done this. There's too many layers. There's too many different things we have to communicate to the player for them to understand. And that's not going to be fun. It's going to be just annoying. So another example of this, by the way, we were talking about the armies thing, and I know there was a lot of comments about that, but there's another, some other new things we've added in that I think you'll really like. Like, so for example, we talked about how we scoped how many units that you can use to make up your army. At the same time, a new feature that we added, and Veso now knows I'm going to say this, but he didn't know it before today. We also are experimenting with the ability to actually hire mercenary armies straight out the gate to be an army that you can somewhat control. So you have your royal court limit for how many armies that you can personally control, but if you have a lot of gold and you have a mercenary with a leader in it, maybe you could offer them a whole bunch of gold to fight for you as an army, not as an individual unit. And you can't control that army the same way you can as an army that is led by your royal court, but you can give them orders like defend this province or attack this province or whatever. So they're kind of like another extension to your power. And I actually loved this change because it allows you to get more armies than just your royal court without having to add like a whole bunch of other features and functionality. And it's a good like defense force. Like everyone's talked about having like a defense force. Now you can use your armies to be out and attacking, and maybe if you have enough gold, you can hire a couple mercenary armies to be kind of your police force around your territory. It opens up a lot of cool possibilities, and it's fun. I mean, who knows if it'll stay? It's one of those things we're experimenting with right now, but I played it in the last build and I love it. It's a really cool new add. So it opens us up to add other things like that when we keep certain things at the right level of depth. It's not that the game gets simpler. Trust me, it is by no means a simple game.
Yeah, that's what Brad said. Probably you can hear a dog barking, so that's my dog. Sorry about it. What Brad said, it's what in the build right now. You can, besides just hiring troops from the mercenary camps, you can also have the entire mercenary band and use them. Yeah, they can support your invasion. They can defend your kingdom. They can even go after a certain army and one of your marshals and reinforce them in battles and just be there. Of course, they're not as loyal as armies as your just had characters, but yeah, we are still experimenting with this. Still not officially confirmed, but it's cool.
Yeah. It's a cool feature. And to answer your question, Ivory Knight, they are very expensive. Like they are almost crushingly expensive. So it's like it's usually more of like a mid to late game feature where it's like, all right, I now have quite a bit of income coming in and I can decide how I want to spend it. And it's like, all right, I know it's gonna cost me a lot of gold to maintain this thing, but let's use it because I need it for right now. Yeah, when I first played it, it took a lot of time before I was able to afford buying even one of them. And then once you buy it, just the initial like buy-in cost is really high. Then you have to pay for that maintenance cost, so your income just goes down the tubes. But it's a lot of extra flexibility, so you're making those trade-offs, and that's what makes it fun. So that's really cool. And honestly, guys, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to things we're iterating on. There's so much going on behind the scenes. I know that right now the team is doing, we've talked about espionage before, and there's a build that they're going to be delivering, or they just delivered, actually. I'm sorry, that just got delivered, and there's some like major espionage changes they've been working on to add a lot more purpose and depth to the espionage actions. And Veso was talking before the call that as you describe it, internally you guys have been doing some play testing, and everyone likes to kick each other underneath the table. Is that how you worded it, I think?
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, still needs balancing and stuff like that. But well, espionage is a big topic. It deserves its own DevDiary. It's probably a little teaser here. It's very different than the old game. Some people would like this. Some people would not like this. Probably, but we had to make it different because of the multiplayer. Multiplayer changes so many things, but we are happy how it works. It's mid to late game feature, but I don't want to go.
Yeah, we should talk about it later. We'll have an entire diary on espionage at a later time. So.
Yeah, at least one diary. It's a big topic. It's powerful.
Maybe we can talk about the single player and the multiplayer implications of espionage, because they're very different. Well, let's get into our Q&A section here. We have a couple questions to go over. We got about 10, 12 minutes to go through them. I'll be answering some of the questions that came up on the stream that I didn't get to while we were going. And then I'll be grabbing some of the questions from our community site. As I said before, please, we'd love to have you join our community site. It's community.knightsofhonor.com. It's where we post our dev diaries. It's where we have conversations with the community. Like Veso said, you may sometimes think that we're not paying attention, but we read those things very, very regularly, and they come up in conversations all the time. And you'd be surprised at how much of your feedback actually does impact the decision processes on certain features and functionality. So it's a very valuable place both for us to see how you're interacting and what you're talking about, what you care about, as well as a chance for you guys to interact with each other and debate different cool topics. So, and we always take questions from the Dev Diary. So if you ever go in and respond on a Dev Diary, you'll have your questions almost certainly added on to. So the first question is coming from Zerg, and I actually think I saw someone else ask this in the chat earlier. His question is, how will the crossing of major rivers work? In the last image of today's Dev Diary, you can clearly see that the army is about to cross a river, but how will it actually work? Is there absolutely no gameplay mechanic planned for that, and the army will just turn into boats for some seconds and turn back? Or do they maybe already have some mechanics in place? So he's really asking about how river crossings work.
Yeah, so what happens is your army is marching, and when it reaches the river banks, it camps. It makes a camp, and then there is I wouldn't say too long, but also not very short time, which passes, and it's visualized by a big arrow, which also acts like a progress bar, so you can see how much time is remaining until the successful river crossing happens. So after this time passes, the army just appears on the other side of the river. But normally, I'm saying normally because there are some few exceptions here, but normally it gets in a slightly disorganized. So armies has this potential disorganized state. And it's very good to attack them in this very moment, or even in the moment while they are camping and preparing to cross the river. It's also a good moment to counterattack, which is hard to organize from the other side of the river. Just have this in mind.
Yeah, there's also, I think, some skills or perks that can potentially impact your river crossing abilities too. So there's other mechanics there that I don't want to go too deep into it, but the short answer is there's a simple presentation, but there's other things around river crossings that you can leverage as a player based on what the circumstances are, and it can be pretty fun. There's a lot of cool aspects of, like, you have to actually think about, okay, where do I want to cross the river and how do I want to do this, because when and where you do it can make a difference for sure.
Yeah.
He also asked another question that I think I'm going to just tag on real quick, which is how is modding coming along? Do you still plan to have vast modding capabilities at release? That's so you can answer that. That's really short, right? The answer is yes.
Well, as a yes, of course, on release of the game, you'll have a lot of possibilities to change the game. I would say more than what you had in the old game.
Yeah.
And we are planning to also release some more powerful bunch of tools which we are using internally, like a modding tools package sometime after the release, which will open even more possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So by the way, we're not doing new gameplay today. So he may, my producer in the background may have preamble a little bit, but I mentioned this earlier, and he's setting me up for it. So thank you for that. We are definitely going to be showing new gameplay in the next 1 to 2 months. I've gotten Veso's word that he'll be okay with me committing to that. So I'm going to aim for the next DevStream. It may be the one after that. There's some things in motion that need to settle first, but whether it's DevStream 16 or DevStream 17, I can promise you that between the next two that you're going to see some new gameplay footage. We're going to be able to show you some cool new stuff. And there's one thing specifically that I want to show you guys that I think you'll really like, a visualization about a feature. I'm not going to say what it is, but it's really cool, and we'll show that off when we show that gameplay footage. So I think you'll like that. Moving on. So Basilisk on the community site asks, I'm sure you thought this through already, but just in case, player testing might help with a whole slew of things to see what works and what doesn't, even if it's a closed beta. So I'll take this one. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but we are definitely going to be doing tests with the community, probably focus tests, probably a closed beta. I can tell you right now that we're actually discussing plans for focus testing with people in our community. The ironic thing is that no one will know when we do it, because it's going to be under NDA, and it's going to be very closed door when we first do the first round of focus testing. I can promise you that the people who are participating in the forums and on the dev streams are going to be potentially pinged to participate in those focus tests. So there's a number of you that are pretty active, and you probably will get an invite at some point in time. And funny enough, you won't be able to tell anyone that you're invited, so that'll be a thing. It looks like THQ Nordic wants to be asked, but we're definitely talking about that right now and talking about timing. It's something that we're going to be doing in the future, and could be even in the near future. But past that, we're also going to be doing some kind of beta, probably a closed beta. I don't know what scope of it's going to be. I don't know how we're going to get access to it. None of those details have been worked out. We're still way too far ahead from that. But we definitely want to get people involved in playing the game before we release it in some capacity. And get that feedback in real time, so we can tune and balance. And I mean, honestly, a game like this, there's so much depth to it that no matter how much we test it internally, players are going to get very different experiences, and that's part of the build of the game. It's part of the purpose. So absolutely expect more info of that as we get closer, and you'll get some of that. By the way, Home 24, love that. You're right. It is Schrodinger's focus test, right? You only know about it when you're there. And until you're there, you don't know if it's happened or not. I love it. That's very clever. Um,
Well, actually, it actually might be happening right now, but you don't know. I will let this sink for a while.
oh my God! Don't! You're gonna make everyone's mind explode in chat. There's someone
Well,
in there.
that was
I
mean. I'm kidding.
just can't tell anybody. No, I will tell you. No jokes aside. Focus testing is not running right now, Veso. Don't cause wars to happen in the forums of people trying to harass who could or could not be in focus tests. But
Yeah.
they are coming, and we'll definitely be reaching out to a few of you.
Yeah, we cannot wait for this to happen, by the way. I'm telling this to all the people that are in the stream right now. We are really cannot wait for this to happen. It's very important for us, as Brad said.
Yeah, definitely. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to grab a couple more questions. So Yavor was asking about, I'm going to summarize some of these questions. I apologize, but I just want to make sure I get to them. And Veso, I made this quick answer so we can get through the last three. So Yavor was asking about tactical battles, the real-time strategy battles. I can tell you right now that they're heavy in development. I think there's like a team of 5 or 6 people that are almost working exclusively on technology and mechanics there. We have nothing to show for that yet. We can't even really talk about it. A lot of it's very volatile, very much changing and working, and some of the systems happening on the worldview are changing the battle view ideas too. So we're not really ready to talk about it yet, but it is something that once we get to the point where we're going to talk about it, you'll get more details. So it is coming. It is very much a focus of development right now, and expect that once we get to a point we can talk about it, you'll get some cool information. Shapo from Niners Gaming, who I see also is in the chat, one of the regulars. So he's talking about the different army sizes. So from different army sizes, depending on the hiring province, could you elaborate this more in the stream? What I'm concerned with, what if I move a large host to a poorer province with less food production? Can I still maintain the upkeep for it? So I think he was kind of riffing off of the concepts we talked about where armies can be expensive to maintain. To be clear, army maintenance when it comes to like regular maintenance is done at the kingdom level. So you have like a kingdom amount of resources like food or whatnot, and that's what supports your army's ability to be stood up or not, and like its normal resources. There is like your army's provisions, like how much food it needs to go march, say, far away, but that can be picked up from any province. You can always grab it from a province along the way. You could pillage someone potentially and get resources. There's a lot of different ways to refill the stocks from an army as it's on the march. When it comes to actual like maintenance costs for an army, that happens at the kingdom level, at the province level. So you may have misunderstood that a little bit. I don't know if that's if you want to add another comment there, but I think that's just a misunderstanding.
Oh, it's just one short sentence. It's what you said, but also to add on top of that, it still depends how big your army is, and if you go outside of your kingdom on a long march, the further you are away from your kingdom, the harder it is to maintain food supplies and get
Definitely.
food.
And then Ivory Knight asked a question about the troop visualization, and if is it actually going to visualize the number of troops in the instant, or the tactical battles, or is it like a one-to-one relationship or a ratio relationship when it comes to like every troop in the worldview? Does it represent one unit or one group of units in the battle view? We're still working out how that's going to work. I can tell you it will be some kind of ratio, because obviously if you have the difference between like a 500 manpower army and a 5,000 manpower army, that's not going to scale one-to-one. We can't, we're not going to be pulling that kind of RTS experience into our game. But how that's going to work and how the ratios are going to represent themselves, we're not ready to talk about those details quite yet. So, but you are onto something there. Veso was saying earlier when we were talking about this question, he's like, Ivory Knight may have, he's on the right path. It's something like that. So yes, definitely. I know we have like 1 or 2 minutes left. I'm going to try to grab 1 or 2 questions that we didn't grab from the stream. There was one question I just saw that said, can you start the game as a rebel? I actually believe you can't do that right now. We don't have any plans for that in for probably the baseline release. Maybe something for a DLC or something, but not right now. No plans for you to be able to play Rebels when the game initially goes into release for sure. But it's something we've talked about. It is a cool idea, and I think there's some neat thoughts around how we could support the game, and maybe that's a cool topic for expanded feature sets down the road. Let's see here. Answer that question about answer the river crossing question. bribes. Gimla was asking about bribes. I mean, I guess in a way you do bribe. Actually, it's interesting you say that. I think it was when we were talking about the mercenary conversation. I just sent over some notes to Veso about the last build that I was playing, and I had a very similar idea. I don't know if it'll make it into the game. It could be not worth it, but it was like, what if someone hired a mercenary army and was running around? Is there an opportunity for you to like one up them? Where it's like, if they're paying them a certain amount of money, you could go to that mercenary leader and go, hey, if I pay you double, will you fight for me instead of them? I don't know if we'll do that because that could be really griefy. Like, you could grief a lot, especially in multiplayer. Maybe there's a cooldown or there's a certain like hurt set you need in order to pull that off. But I had a very similar kind of thought. I think I passed that note over in our last review session. So I don't know. Maybe it'll make it in the game in some way, shape, or form that you can bribe a mercenary away from someone that's already paying them. That could be kind of fun.
Yeah, we'll see about it.
Yeah, we'll see. It adds a whole bunch of potential shenanigans, like you said, as kicking under the table. That can be a whole thing, right? So, well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining the stream. Veso, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you, Brad.
I know you're a busy man, so I always appreciate when you can take some time out to join us here. So really appreciate that. It takes a lot of effort to run a studio, so I know you have a lot of different things going on. Anything you want to say to the fans before we call it a day?
Well, thank you for being here. Next time, bring your friends and family as well.
There you go. You heard it from Veso. Bring your friends and family. I'm sure your mom would love to see the DevDiary 16 stream. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. We'll see you guys next time in a number of weeks, and we hope you guys take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you later. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.